Hey guys, happy new moon in the sign of Leo on August 4th, 2024. I wanted to do a deep dive today about dwarf planet goddess Eris. She is, at the time of the new moon on August 4th, conjunct Chiron. And Eris conjunct Chiron in the sign of Aries is its own unique thing. I talk about that in my podcast. I wanted to take the time here to unpack Eris a little bit more and help us learn what her energetic is and how we might be able to navigate it. Eris was just discovered in 2005. And as the story goes, when she was discovered in 2005, she was found to be slightly larger than Pluto, that outermost planet of our solar system, as modernly accepted as true. She was bigger. There was an argument that whether or not she should be a planet too, and the end decision was that she was a dwarf planet, and now Pluto is a dwarf planet. So there was a big thing about Eris causing Pluto to be demoted. I think less than that. I don't know that Eris or Pluto really have a reason to care how we classify them. Their energy is very similar. It's also very unique. And I alluded to in the podcast that if Pluto is the god of the underworld, a scary thing, but he's also an aspect of divine masculine energy. He is a karmic rebalancer. You know, when we're having Pluto aspects, we have death and rebirth transformation. Eris is the feminine version of that. And I wanted to begin to explore with you what Eris might mean for us during this year, 2025 and 2026. So, because Eris was discovered in 2005, she was already in the sign of Aries. Her orbit is 559 years. So, she, like Pluto, is a generational planet. We don't have a lived experience of anything other than Eris in Aries because modern humans didn't know she existed until 2005. And she's been in Aries since 1922, and she'll be in Aries until 2044, I believe. So the only way we can really get to know Eris and her message and her energy is by I love to look at the myths. We're going to look at the myth, but also we look at her transits. We look at when she's aspecting with another planet is one of the ways that we can kind of get a sense of what she does. So every planet and every sign has a shadow side and an uplifted side, kind of like the yin yang symbol, right? If we think about, the Mars and Aries energetic, the shadow side is warmongering and over ego. The positive side is self-actualization and action and drive and desire. So Eris has also been associated with war and discord. She's one of the names that she's known by as goddess of discord. But I would offer that kind of like Pluto, we only really experience or feel the discord when she is in a grander scheme. Pluto and Eris to me operate on a level that I call subtle energetics. If we think about Mercury is not subtle energetics. Mercury affects our communications. We don't need to have nuanced understanding of energy to have something funky go on with our phone or something when Mercury is in retrograde. The further out you get, the slower the planets move, the more the energetics get subtle. But I like to explore these planets because many astrologers will agree with me when I say the outer planets always win. The subtle energetics is where, for me, the really good stuff is at. So let's also look at Eris, the myth, the legend. We know her from Greek and Roman times, and I'm going to summarize the myth here. So here's where we get to kind of listen to the myth, but see what strikes you in this myth. So there's a wedding happening on Mount Olympus. Peleus is a hero. There's a nymph. I think her name is Thetis. They're getting married. All the gods and goddesses are at this wedding. The only one that doesn't get invited is Eris because she's not invited. She shows up anyway. She knocks on the front door. She's got a golden apple in her hand. She doesn't even really try to come in. She throws the apple into the party and says to the fairest. And this ends up causing a squabble between three women Athena, goddess of wisdom, Venus, goddess of love and beauty, and Juno, the queen herself. And so these women are in an egoic state, squabbling. And Jupiter decides to settle the dispute. He asks this mortal guy named Eris to choose which one of these women is the most beautiful. So the goddesses and the queen herself proceed to bribe Paris. Athena bribes him, says she'll give him intelligence and fighting abilities, martial arts, or something like that. And then Juno, because she's the queen, offers him as a mortal a lot of political clout. And then Venus, because she's the goddess of love and beauty, offers him the most beautiful woman in the world to fall in love with, and she with him. He chooses the latter. But in the execution of that, when the most beautiful woman in the world was already married to King Menelaus, and this is Helen of Troy, and that's what started the Trojan War. So it's a very interesting story, and that's why she's known. And in some senses, she's associated with wars. Some astrologers will track her with upheaval, but I want to offer also there's times where, and we only began to track her in 2005. So then you have to go back to all those events in history and see what the chart for that event was and whether or not Eris was doing anything interesting in terms of aspecting other planets, conjoining what was happening with Eris. And so there is some evidence that she's active during war, but there's more evidence that she's active during something that would maybe be called social change and unsettling transformation. I want to offer an example. So let's talk about something that some astrologists find interesting, the astrology behind COVID. So it was known around January of 2020 that there was a stellium of planets in Capricorn, including Pluto. And Pluto's excavating our structures in Capricorn, right? But around that time, tons of Capricornian energy. Everybody was looking at structures and what Pluto was going to do for structures. Just so happens, several times during that time, Eris was making a hard aspect, a hard square to Pluto. And when she made in January 2020, the first square she did to Pluto, there was a whole stellium of planets in Capricorn. So her squaring could also be, if you think about the golden apple getting thrown into the egoic party to eventually shake things out, that's one of the ways that Eris could be seen. That people would call COVID or whatever was happening discord or disruptive, but you could also take it with a larger lens and wonder, what are we going through? And we're still in it, right? We're still going through a process of death and rebirth. We're still going through a process of transformation. But one of the things that I love is that, you can go back in time, like back, and you can go back to the 1400s where Joan of Arc is burned at the stake. That is also a time when Eris was making an aspect. And Joan of Arc, it involves a female. It's a pretty gruesome act, but it also really became a catalyzing moment for France. It was a huge world stage event. We also have in the 1500s, Anne Boleyn married Henry the Seventh or Eighth of England, and then he declared himself king of his own church, and then he executed his wife. So, interesting thing about politics and women is that there's a theme here. We also have more recently the suffragette movement. Eris was making aspects at that time. Pluto was in Gemini, Eris was in Pisces, Pluto was squaring Eris. In all three of these aspects, let me back up. This is Pluto and Eris having hard aspects. So when there's a hard aspect with Eris, something I would offer about divine feminine feminine power, you could also call it political power, the suffragette movement really solidified and got its first, its states took many years to, every state had to do its own thing to allow women to vote. But I think it was 1920 when that started. And also in 1922 was when Eris moved into Aries. So there's an interesting theme that I see that is the idea of women and rebalancing of power. And if you have followed some of my themes and my work, I find that is just it's a fascinating time for us to be men and women, ideally, hopefully, equally embodied divine masculine, divine feminine. It's not just about whether or not you have a female body, it's about the energetic of divine feminine. And so when we think about what Eris is doing right now, and we have in this particular new moon, we have Eris making an aspect with Chiron. And so Chiron is kind of like the Achilles heel, right? He gets a wound and he spends his whole life going around trying to heal himself. He's not able to heal himself, but he's actually able to teach healing and bring the healing arts to the world. It's an act of service. It's also a challenging act of service. So one of the things that came through in the podcast was that, unity consciousness has been coming up. Also, this idea of karma, this idea of there being a larger sort of ruling body, the universe, goddess, God, that sees everything, and that our vibration is our karma, right? So I like to think of Eris as kind of like Pluto, a great rebalancer. And she's aspecting during this new moon. And this in Chiron would be our own ability to heal ourselves and offer healing for our planet, which is why I love offering global healing meditations. If you haven't had a chance to check out my podcast, go check. I'll link this podcast so that you can go check it out and make an energetic contribution. I think that when Eris comes up, if there is any part of ourselves that is in ego or in shadow or out of alignment, if Algol and Athena are about shining the light of truth, and Sedna just came up last lunar cycle as well, and Sedna is about not just universal karma, but ignorance is no longer an excuse for not offering the best we can to our world. Eris is right there in that theme. And I believe that she really only shows us stuff when it is for the highest good of she's aspecting Chiron, whatever comes up during this new moon, how are we going to be shown what is the way that we can serve the collective the best? And how also, by serving the collective, the karma is that we get the benefits of that service. That is the nature of the healing arts. You are the conduit. When you offer healing, you receive that healing, but also you become a giver to the collective. And that is very much, the idea of reciprocity, very much the idea of oneness. So I believe that Eris is coming online right now, and it's perfect. She's in the sign of Aries till the middle of the 21st century. So in Aries is the I am sign. Aries is the action sign. Aries shadow is also ego, also war. And so I think that if there is anything that comes, I don't know that we're going to see dark violence like we may have seen. Like Joan of Arc is a pretty dark theme, but those were darker times. I don't even know necessarily, I wouldn't say that we're going to see war, but I've said before that I think the energetic for those who are out of alignment might feel very unsettling. And so, I would offer that Eris's energy is about how can we empower the divine feminine within ourselves and also empower the divine feminine within the collective. So I guess something for us to consider with Eris and with her showing up conjunct Chiron is our own internal healing journey and our ability to serve the collective. That is really what's up. And if Eris happens to throw her golden apple into the party of thousands and millions of people, it's really only because she has decided that disruption is the only way for change. I think one of the interesting ways that we can, and we can trust it. That would be the message. Trust it and trust that all will be well and trust that everything is working out. And if there's any contribution that we can make to promote peace and harmony versus disruption, we can think about it instead of it being upheaval disruption. How about simply changing direction? So how can we cultivate our vibration so that we are offering the best vibration that we can, so that when Eris throws her golden apple into the party, we don't need to squabble on stage. We're enjoying the party. We're contributing to the party. We are um, maybe even not affected by it. All right. I hope this is helpful. I want to also invite you to join my email list on August 15th. I'm doing a free heart alchemy healing session. And the way I share the free sessions is via my email list. I also share any goodies they're offering. So hopefully I'll see you on the 15th and have a wonderful, joyous new moon in Leo.